Our next question was sent in the CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Terry in Nashville. I know in the past you've had issues with Colt Cabana doing stupid comedy shit. You've said you made nice with him at NWA 70. How did you feel about his work when you were broadcasting with them? I guess it means the NWA. I think the Superman pin is stupid as fuck, but that overall, he seems to be taking his current role in the NWA about as serious as he is capable of.
Well, I agree. And that's why, it was the Ole Anderson principle. He was really, in a way, Colt Cabana was patient zero on the comedy wrestler bullshit. But his comedy wrestling was so in relation to what the fuck they're doing today, the young kids that have taken over from a veteran like Colt Cabana. His comedy was always, if you had to have it, at least it was almost inoffensive compared to now, where they've just dropped any pretense of any seriousness whatsoever. Colt has the size. He's a full-grown guy. He looks good physically. He's always been able to work. That's why I couldn't believe he just always chose to be silly. Because he can, as the guy mentioned, have straight matches, and he's really good at British World of Sport style. He's just always been silly, but now he was so much less silly than almost every silly fuck today that it's the Ole Anderson principle. But yeah, he can do it when he wants to. And the Superman, I didn't know that was coming. I just like, well, what the fuck? And thankfully, Joe Galley knew what it was called.
What is that? What is the
and
Superman
called it?
Pin? What is it?
He knocked his opponent down flat of his back to where his opponent's legs flew up in the air, and then Cole just dove over the top and with his ankles hooked over the top of the guy's feet and did a push-up on the other side. And if you had the leg press strength of a goddamn, Tom Thumb, you could fucking kick out of that. But it wasn't completely offensive in the presentation of it. It was a little suspect.
Part of the problem now, and it doesn't really go into effect for Cabana as much because he's an older guy. He's like around my age. But you have a whole generation of people who grew up, and if they discovered wrestling, they think that comedy, and bad comedy, 99% of the time, is supposed to be a part of wrestling.
Yeah. That's basically what the problem is. And that's what we've got. And that's what's run every time that I hear a person in person at a comic convention or something. I used to watch wrestling, but I don't anymore. I used to like wrestling, but I don't anymore. I get emails. I get any kind of communication whatsoever. You see it in surveys. And as a matter of fact, and I did read, by the way, the book on roller derby that we're going to be discussing also upcoming on the Experience, because there's some parallels. But the point that I always hear is that we left wrestling because it got so fucking silly or it got so fucking phony. And I never hear retroactively, you hear the made up version from the modern fans. Well, I wouldn't have watched that old shit, well, yeah, you kind of would, because everybody else was. You don't ever hear of any. I hated wrestling until it became a complete shit show and phony as fuck, and everybody trying to fucking tickle everybody else. Then I started watching it. You don't hear that, at least from normal fucking people or in any kind of numbers. You always hear the opposite. We used to love wrestling, watched it for years, and it got so fucking phony and silly and fake and stupid.
Reject that style of wrestling, and there's no faster way to get blackballed nowadays from the indies.
And that's, and there you go. And that's why you mentioned the wrestlers growing up and thinking all these things. The wrestlers have made the fans think it's okay to think of wrestling as silly and phony and fun because it's supposed to be that way. Because the fans think, well, if the wrestlers think that, then we should too. And the wrestlers are so fucking mentally goddamn fucked up and delusional that are allowed in the business these days that they think that. So they then make the fans think it's okay too. And until And I don't think this will ever happen at this point because there's nobody to take charge of the business again, like the territory promoters had charge of the business, control of the business, and just say, no, if you do not take this seriously, you will not be a professional wrestler, and we will weed this shit out. And over a period of years, people forget about shit, but I don't see it happening because even the goddamn people, all the people who knew how to do this right have all either died of old age, retired with all the money they made, or are still barely under contract to fucking Vince for one thing or another. So what we're left with, even the promoters now don't give it. They think this is right. They think it's supposed to be this way. So I don't see anybody correcting this over the immediate next generation or two. And by then, who knows, it may be too late.